Everything has a rhythm. Whether you're fighting, whether you're walking, whether you're typing on a computer, you will naturally fall into a rhythm. It takes far more conscious effort not to adopt a rhythm than it does to adopt a rhythm. Our ability to observe rhythms, to create beats, is highly important then to our psychological function and our performance in athletics, martial arts, and more. So in parkour, we need rhythm because when we're running towards a wall or a ledge, we need to fall into a cadence and adopt a specific rhythm in order to make sure that our footing is correct once we're at that right point. Otherwise, we'll jump too early or too late, or we'll stumble over ourselves and faceplant. In martial arts or boxing, you need to adopt a rhythm and you need to adapt to the opponent's rhythm and then find breaks in that pattern in order to sucker punch them and catch them unawares. It's an incredibly valuable technique. When we're typing, when we're running, we fall into a natural cadence, and this rhythm helps us to perform our very best. And when predicting the movements of things in the real world around us, we need to use rhythm in order to predict where they'll be at a given time. When you're watching something fly through the air, it has a kind of rhythm. It's the same mechanisms that you're using in your brain, your ability to predict movement over time and to anticipate those patterns. And in case you think I'm just blowing smoke, there are studies demonstrating that rhythm training can improve the performance of tennis players versus those who've engaged in no such timing. Again, because it helps them presumably to predict the movement of the ball and to fall into a rhythm with their opponent that they can then exploit later on. A particularly obvious example of beat and rhythm being useful in terms of performance is in computer games. If you've ever played a game where there's a bouncing object and you have to run through it at the right time, or a laser that goes on and off, this demonstrates how being able to predict a pattern can help you to avoid a hazard. And lots of computer games are built around this concept. One of my original examples of why we need rhythm was that in real life you might find yourself faced with a stalactite that's dropping in a cave at a certain rhythm and you have to dive under it. Then I realised that literally will never happen to anyone. So the ability to predict and sense rhythm really does have demonstrable benefit, whether you're looking at sports, athletics, martial arts, parkour, gymnastics, or even something like long distance running or typing long essays, where falling into a rhythm helps you to get into a kind of groove and more easily enter a flow state. And this is something that we don't all have to the same degree. We've already seen that you can train to improve your rhythm, and some people are actually unable to sense rhythm at all. I have a mate who is beat deaf, and this means he can't hear and adapt to a beat, and he looks like a complete tosser on the dance floor. This might actually be, by the way, why we find people who can dance well attractive, because an ability to sense a rhythm is a trait that has survival value. Okay, so where in the brain is rhythm located? Well, on the one hand, you've got your auditory cortex, which of course handles auditory information, and so it makes sense that this would be useful for sensing a rhythm. And indeed, damage to this area will impair your ability to sense beats. However, beats and rhythms aren't only auditory, they can also be visual, as we've seen. And in fact, my friend who's beat deaf, interestingly, says that he's much better at keeping time when he sees something visual, so he can dance by watching other people dance and mimicking them, like a gorilla. So like I've said, it also seems that an ability to sense rhythms and beats is connected to our ability to sense the passage of time in general, and this might be further insight into why it's just so valuable. And the areas of the brain that are responsible, it seems, for sensing the passage of time are the cerebellum, the cerebral cortex, and the basal ganglia. And again, damage to these parts of the brain can impair our ability not only to sense rhythms, but to sense the passage of time in general. Fun fact, I used to be able to perfectly cook an egg without using a timer. I no longer have that ability. My eggs come out bad. What's really interesting to me is the fact that our ability to sense rhythm and the passage of time seems to be related closely to our ability to visualize in general. And this is in keeping with some of the things I've talked about recently on this channel. So when we predict how long a movement's going to take, or when we try to engage in some kind of physical rhythm, like a dance, we actually use the motor cortex or the premotor cortex to estimate how long that's going to take and how long the gaps in between those movements are. But when we estimate how long something visual is going to take, when we try and predict a flashing light, for instance, that actually uses the visual cortex. So it seems that we're literally simulating that action in our brain, and how accurate that simulation is determines just how accurate our prediction of that rhythm or that beat's going to be. So it might be that improving your beat could have crossover effects and improve your general visualization, your general embodied cognition, and your whole ability to think. But it's more complicated than that. We don't really understand how it all works, because in one study, rats had their entire cortices removed, and they still had some lingering remnants of time perception remaining. So it seems this is a really innate ability that might be very unconscious to a certain extent, which is why we fall into a rhythm when we walk or when we're breathing. And that means that some of these other processes are kind of layered on top of that, so you might have multiple levels of beat perception. But whilst we don't know entirely how our perception of beats and rhythms work, what we do know is that it's important for our performance and our athletics and fighting, so we want to try and improve it as much as possible. So how would we go about doing that? Well, in the study I talked about earlier, where tennis players were improving their rhythm using rhythm training, they actually would hit the ball or perform a certain movement to the tick of a metronome. So that's something you can very easily take part in on your own. Just set up some kind of repetitive beat, a metronome, or perhaps something on the computer, and then time your movements in concord with that. You can also find videos online that let you try and predict your sense of rhythm, and this is designed specifically for training and improving that sense of rhythm. These often involve a flashing light or a bouncing object, and your job is to try and remember that rhythm, adapt to it, and then the visual stimuli or the auditory stimuli will disappear, and you then need to continue the rhythm, and then when it reappears you can see how close you were. If you try it a few times, you'll find that you gradually improve. I'll put a link to that down in the description below, or you can find it in the article that accompanies this video on thebioneer.com. And like I was saying earlier, any computer game that challenges your rhythm will also help you to improve your innate ability to predict beats. One I've been playing recently that's really cool is called Thumper, and this describes itself as a rhythm violence game. When you play it, you'll see what I mean. It's really intense and it's awesome in virtual reality. Likewise, there's also a rhythmic element in another game I've been playing lately, and that's Res Infinite, which I just love. You can also improve your rhythm from games like Guitar Hero, of course, or any of those Just Dance games. Another really good one actually is the Batman Arkham series, where the combat is based very much around rhythm, and here you're hitting your parries and your combos at a certain time based on prompts on the screen, and it's brilliant for improving your ability to quickly react based on a rhythm and a timing. And what better way to train your rhythm and timing than playing a game about Batman? But finally, one of the very best ways you can improve your sense of rhythm is by playing an instrument. Playing an instrument has been shown to be great for all kinds of cognitive faculties. It's great for your brain plasticity, your creativity, and yes, it's also very good for your rhythm and your timing. The drums will be particularly good, but any instrument will boost your ability to sense rhythms, to predict patterns, and to move with perfect timing. So I hope you found this video useful and interesting, guys. If you did, please consider leaving a like and sharing it around. It really helps me out. The thing you can do for me that helps the most is to share this on places like Reddit, any forums you take part in. That gives me a massive boost, and I thank you in advance if you can do that. Let me know in the comments down below what you think, whether this is a kind of training you're going to be adopting into your own routine, and what kind of stuff you'd like to see from me in the future. I've got a whole bunch of stuff coming up, topics on productivity, nootropics, brain training, fitness, martial arts, you name it, all the usual stuff. So if that sounds good, then subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching, and bye for now.